I'm Maria Issaris of Audiobooksradio, and I'm here with a group of us. I'll introduce them shortly. All of them, incredibly talented people, and I've been really lucky to work with them. And we produce audiobooks. And firstly, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm speaking, which is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Was and always will be Aboriginal land. So in this workshop, we've got some big ambitions and welcome you to ask questions because we're going to cover a very large territory. And it's because we've travelled a long way in the past 3 years since we've been involved in developing an audiobook business. Mission was and always will be to ensure Australian storytelling thrives in the largest growing area of publishing, which is audio. And Kristen Kelly, who's on our team, will give you some demonstration of that. I want you to go away with a lot of information, and we think it's important to develop a viable business in this area because as a writer and publisher, if that's what you are out there, it means you get quality assurance. It means there is the ability to evolve within the industry. And Marty Gallagher, our audio engineer, will describe how that situation is evolving just even technically, and to meet changing needs of authors and writers. And also sustainability for the future so that Australian authors always have a good source of local but global quality production for their writing and manuscripts. We know in the last 3 years, we've broken new ground in the way we produce. We didn't want to, we just had to in order to progress, and happy for others to follow and to learn from others and to collaborate. We'll have 5 speakers today, and all of us are in the thick of audiobook production as we speak. And between us, I think we have a very large store of information. But we will each talk about what excites us from our different vantage points. And I'm pretty sure we won't cover everything we want to. So if you want to tether us back to an area that you would like more information on, put that question in the chat room and we will do our best to answer it. We'll give you a complete description of how an audiobook is made from several key points of view. We started about 3 years ago and there was amazing synchronization of timing because it happened just before COVID hit the world and forced many people to stay at home. But it was before that I want to acknowledge the foresight of people like Tim Coronel and Sophie Masson, who way back then gave encouragement and moral support and information to me and to others to develop systems and processes to get some local audiobook production going. The sector has been very inviting and collaborative. I can't underestimate how supportive and generous of heart, for instance, Andrew Farrell of eBook Alchemy has been. Because right from the beginning, when I was producing my very first audiobook, I think I would call on the verge of tears or tantrum or some combination, and he would share resources, information, painstakingly describing the areas and gaps. Bron Meehan of Little Fiction, who's done such good work in this area, and later Deb Lee of Ingram Sparks, so very wonderful to deal with and who opened doors for our growth. This was before COVID. Audiobook production, it was taking off, but its impetus has almost rocketed us into another orbit of storytelling and listening habits. At that time, I was working within radio broadcasting. I just want to give you a bit of context. I was producing and managing. So listening was an ingrained skill, even more so in the part of the sector I was involved in, which was for the vision impaired. So we were part of a national network that included Vision Australia Radio. Vision Australia and the RPH network were experts at reading material for the audio reliant for over 30 years. VA had, in fact, the first audio library and complete copyright release of every literary work known to humanity. And that's under the International Marrakesh Treaty. That means they were exempt from the need to even ask permission of an author or publisher to develop an audiobook version of works. That's over 30 years of technical knowledge right there. The catch was that none of these audiobooks was allowed to be sold. And they were not made in a format that's uploadable on selling platforms. They were carefully curated so that none but genuinely vision impaired people could access the material. The audiobooks were produced in OBI, an open source technology, which is assistive device compatible. It's still a source of frustration to me that OBI versions cannot be uploaded to any of the SaaS platforms around the world. COVID was also a time when performers in Australia were very much disadvantaged. They didn't receive funding, performances were cancelled, careers put on hold, no job keeper for performers. And it was at a time when I started producing a radio program, interviewing new and indie and unpublished writers, because I was one of those myself, and also working with a small publisher after career as what I call a corporate animal and journalist. I didn't exactly come up with the idea of starting an audiobook business. It kind of overwhelmed me as an imperative force. The collection of creatives that have brought this small company to life are all in the arts and pretty much immersed in storytelling as part of their daily lives. Kristen Kelly, who will be our first speaker, is a dramaturg, trained librarian and a mother. You will get from her presentation how meticulous she is and pretty much loving dealing with storytelling. Loretta Jessup is one of the most talented writers that I have come across in over 10 years of dealing with words, including the writing group that I'm currently organised and will go to straight after this. It has over 600 members and it's grown to that over the past 3 years. She's accomplished at many things, but the way she dealt with her role at Audiobooksradio has been from that space of a fellow writer. So the systems we've developed are respecting that endeavour and the value of writing in our whole community. Caroline George is an exceptional voice performer. She's a stage professional who's worked internationally and was the very first narrator I ever dealt with. We joke to this day that I think we paid her threepence halfpenny for her work. She had come home to Sydney from overseas as COVID started. Her feedback and guidance on how the narration role works in audiobook production has been so very valuable. Once you hear her talk, I don't think you'll be able to listen to another podcast in the same way. And finally, Marty Gallagher, a strange phenomenon in being an audio engineer who loves reading stories. And he probably knows more about audiobook production from a technical point of view than anyone else I know. He'll describe to you what good audio engineering does in developing the perfect audiobook. I think you'll be astonished. Mind you, he looks about 10 years old, but I assure you he isn't. His level of expertise is enormous. And I'd love to grant his wish that he does nothing but audiobook production week in, week out. First up, we will describe the whole audiobook landscape. I want to let you know that where Audiobooksradio sits in the landscape in Australia. Our focus is on team-based production. That is, we've spent time and funds to develop systems that allow an author to be immersed in the process of the production without actually needing to spend a lot of time on the project itself. We're aiming at providing high-level production, having built a reputation now which allows, for instance, a government department such as the Department of Community and Justice to appoint us as their audiobook producers for their annual anthology. This is the third time I've managed this project, and each time after the project has gone out to tender. Describing the landscape in which we are operating is Kristen Kelly. I did describe she's a dramaturg by training and profession. She's got 2 small children. Her qualifications are from New York, the equivalent of our master's degree. She'll give you some eye-opening facts and figures and describe what has happened in the past 3 years. Now, I am going to share my screen and I will give you Kristen, who in fact has pre-recorded her session.